was a drive for her.
There wasn't any reason that I could be so selfish to quit and let my teammates down, and they're basically like my brothers. I can't just quit on my family, especially because I just had a bad day or had a bad practice.
And at practice, she was just like any other player.
She played 4 years for me, and I never once had to make compensation for her, except for locker rooms and stuff. I never made it easier on her. I never did, anything but just treated her like a player.
During her days at Mountain View, Holland has not only played football, but competed in softball and wrestling as well. Though kicker Sarah Fuller may have made history in the Power 5 and college football, it's just another sport to play for the inside linebacker at Mountain View High School.
I think it's because I see how shy other people can be. I'm just not like that. I've never been shy or anything. I've always been confident and never afraid to speak my mind. So I think that just watching other people and how they act, I just never wanted to be like that. And I just wanted to be myself and not be afraid of who I am.
Holland's attitude was groomed growing up with 2 older brothers who played football and wrestled. They helped Karsten become who she is today.
Me and my brothers would fight all the time, and I just have to prove that I was stronger. I've just watched them grow up to be men, and I don't want to disappoint them.
Now, young girls might want to grow up and be like Karsten Holland, confident in whatever they want to do. Karsten is planning on going to college next year with scholarship offers starting to roll in for wrestling. As for her family and football, her father has been coaching at Mountain View for 10 years. In those years, all 3 of his own kids have been on his roster at one point playing inside linebacker. In the broadcast center, Reed Harmon, Cronkite News.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us.
For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
Are Asians represented fairly in Hollywood? We break it down next.
So today on Break It Down, I've got Jeff Yang, who is an expert on Asian American media, pop culture, an advocate for representation. You're also very familiar with the pressures and expectations that get imposed on Asian-themed and Asian-focused characters, shows, movies. I wanted to talk today about that, and with Disney's Mulan, the most recent one blowing up my social media feed. Thanks for coming on to talk about those inevitable controversies. This one's been criticized from the right and the left on a host of issues, from casting to credits. Do you think that's fair, unfair? What does that look like to you?
Thank you for asking me to break this down. There is a lot to break down. And yes, the controversies seemed kind of inevitable. They seem as if they surround virtually any expression of our community or our diaspora community in an era where I think the standards are increasingly higher, right, than just mere representation. You know, we don't want to just be on screen. We want to see authentic and relevant and true to our life and our lifestyles and our culture expressions of our stories. And as far as Mulan is concerned, I mean, it was always going to be a little bit of a third rail for 2 reasons. The first is Mulan as a Chinese story is kind of at the bedrock of an entire mythic structure around who women are, around the idea of heroism, around basically cutting against the grain of patriarchy that has been beloved for centuries, but adopted more recently in China as kind of the celebration of the female hero, of the female protagonist. And so it was always going to be a challenging thing to adapt from a Western perspective. But that's where the other
and the notion of family. And looking out for. I mean, that's such a
honor. That's the second beat, right? When you look at Mulan from a modern lens, Disney's already done that once through its animated version, and so there's a lot of nostalgia in some ways for that 1990s, very kind of Hollywoodized expression of Mulan from Asian Americans. So it's sort of like on one side you had China and the anxiety of those traditions, and then on the other side you had Asian Americans and their concerns for their nostalgic love for this first expression of Disney magic, if you will. It was kind of a tough needle to thread, you know?
So how close are we to equity? I mean, where Asian-themed productions can just be judged for themselves?
Do we give our stories, however they're expressed, a chance to live, right? Do we actually ensure that there is a marketplace for our ideas? And that's something which people have been trying really hard to do. There have been movements like the Gold Open movement, where people are trying to give just a big first weekend to anything with Asian and Asian American protagonists to kind of prove that there's hunger for this sort of story.
Mm-hmm.
But the other...
How many times did you go to Crazy Rich Asians? Just asking. Because
like
I went...
7?
I went like 7 times. I did.
Well, there you go, right? And Crazy Rich Asians is obviously the perhaps best example of this. It was a as I think John Chu, the director, said, part of a movement, not just a moment, not just a movie for that matter. Right. And yet, I mean, that doesn't mean we can't and shouldn't critique or be concerned about narratives when they do hit the screen. There's a term that my friend and podcast co-host Phil Yu and his friend Jenny Yang coined called rep sweats, right? Representation sweats. and that idea is that because we're represented so rarely on screen, when something does appear, it feels like we bear an extra burden. We got to carry this whole thing of everybody pointing to us and saying, hey, is this you up there on this screen?
How much do you think the controversies affect greenlighting more big budget movies with Asian themes?
I want to believe that we are finally at a point where the question isn't about whether or not Asian American stories in the most general sense can work on screen. We've proven that they can, right? And nobody ever says when a movie starring a white protagonist set in a white setting does not do well that, oh my gosh, we got to stop making white movies. That's just that's just not the way Hollywood works. So I think that we're at a point now where people are starting to say, okay, there are great stories to be told. They often have different faces, they come from different places, but we don't have to actually measure things against this standard of success, which suggests that one failure means the entirety of a community needs to be silenced.
You've let down all the Chinese people.
That's just what my parents tell me when I make any kind of mistake, but yes.
Right.
But yeah, it's something which I think we still struggle with and are very anxious about. That is another component of the sort of rep sweats, right? That if something does poorly, it does essentially cut the cord for all of us. But yeah, I mean, we fight and we work and we struggle and we hope so that those things don't happen, so that kind of apocalyptic sensibility can kind of go away.
Right. I mean, I saw a tweet that called Mulan the most controversial Disney film since Song of the South. So, right. And, are we to the point that Hollywood actually understands that good, diverse content is good for business? I
do think that Hollywood is getting to a point where there is a recognition that it's not enough simply to cast somebody or anybody, and it's not enough just to put something up on screen. There is a real need to have people behind the scenes who are sort of shepherding a story to make sure that it feels real and authentic. And even in a realm of imagination and fantasy, there's still that sense of a need for the soul of a story to come through.
Sharing the mysticism of that culture.
well, in an appropriate fashion, right? I mean, we don't all walk around, talking about honor all the time and blessed with chi or something.
Right, our talking dragons, right?
We're not Jedi, folks, but yes. So yeah, this is one of the challenges, right? I mean, again, we tell stories that are sometimes not just hero stories, but superhero stories. Even there, though, there are ways of telling them that feel true.
Absolutely. And on that, I just want to say thank you so much for coming today on Break It Down to talk about this, and I hope you'll join us again.
Thank you. Consider it broken.
Great chatting with you, Jeff.
This hour of local news is made possible by contributions from the Friends of PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you. If you have comments about Arizona PBS News, please contact us at one of the addresses on your screen. Thank you. When you want to be more amazed, Arizona PBS delivers the thrill of exploration in science and history, thanks to financial support from you and
Friendship Village Tempe, a retirement community for over 30 years, offers independent living with residency options, lifelong learning classes, as well as continuing care. Information at friendshipvillageaz.com.
The brain is imbued with an incredible gift, constantly changing its structure and function throughout our lives. Join me, Ashley Banfield, as we explore this untapped power to transform our lives for the better, even as we age, in The Brain Revolution.
all new tonight at 8:30 on Arizona PBS.
This month in Passport on the PBS Video app, your on-demand library for the best of PBS.
Keep using that word lie.
So you're saying you're clean?
Squeaky.
Nature is fundamentally essential to our future existence.
We need nature to survive on this planet.
I think it's the best thing I've ever done. It's true to me, and that's why I like it. It's me and nobody else.
These and other shows from your PBS station are available with Passport on the PBS Video app. Download it today.
Arizona PBS celebrates a moment in time. Made possible by Rock Springs Cafe. Stories come alive at the Hurd Museum as fine art, rare paintings, and one-of-a-kind sculptures gives voice to Native Americans and their culture.
Explore new ideas and new worlds here on Arizona PBS, a community service of Arizona State University.
This is Pam Tillis. Join me for a musical journey through the years with the greatest female country entertainer of all time, Dolly Parton.
All new Thursday night at 7 on Arizona PBS. Support for Arizona PBS comes from viewers like you and from...
I'm Susan Linkus of the Linkus Group, a fee-based registered investment advisor specializing in financial planning, investment management, insurance strategies, and more. LinkusGroup.com, investing for life.
Ironwood Cancer and Research Centers, providing personalized treatment options through research trials, genetic testing, and counseling, focused on emotional, physical, and social support, outsmarting cancer one patient at a time.
Good evening, I'm Judy Woodruff on the NewsHour tonight. Hopes for a vaccine. We talk with a lead member of the team determining who gets the first shot. Then, standing up for an honest and transparent election. A top Georgia official warns of the dangers of violent language as the president and his team keep up their attacks. And on display, a woman Renaissance master painter, often overlooked, has her day at London's National Gallery.
She had a very forceful character, and actually when you look at her pictures, you get that sort of personality come through her pictures as well, I think. And she is sort of determined to be considered on a par with other male artists.
All that and more on tonight's PBS NewsHour.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
moving our economy for 160 years. BNSF, the engine that connects us.
Consumer Cellular, Johnson & Johnson, financial services firm Raymond James,
supporting social entrepreneurs and their solutions to the world's most pressing problems. SchoolFoundation.org.
the Lemelson Foundation, committed to improving lives through invention in the U.S. and developing countries. On the web at lemelson.org. Supported by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Britain has now become the first country to approve a rigorously tested COVID-19 vaccine. The creation of Pfizer and a German pharmaceutical company won emergency approval today. Inoculations in Britain could begin next week. Still, the World Health Organization forecasts there won't be enough vaccine to stop new surges for another 3 to 6 months. We'll return to this after the news summary. President-elect Biden warned today that the pandemic could kill another 250,000 people in the U.S. in the next 2 months. He did not offer details, but that is far more than CDC projections. Mr. Biden also addressed the economic toll and promised efforts to spark a speedy recovery. He pressed Congress for a down payment now on new relief.
I believe that with the right policies, we can fundamentally change things. And my hope is that we'll be able to help in a short order, but that depends a lot on our friends in Congress and the other side who are prepared to take the action that has to be taken.
We'll talk with 2 U.S. senators about COVID relief and other issues later in the program. President Trump ran into opposition today to his veto threat against a sweeping defense bill. He demanded a provision to end liability protections for social media companies for their users' posts. Republican Senator Jim Inhofe, chair of the Armed Services Committee, dismissed the demand, and negotiators approved a final version without the liability language. Afghanistan's government and the Taliban have had a breakthrough of sorts. They announced a preliminary deal today, setting the rules for peace talks. It is their first written agreement in 19 years of war. Ethiopia and the United Nations agreed today on opening a humanitarian corridor into the country's Tigray region. Some 6 million people have been trapped there during a month of fighting between the army and rebel forces. The agreement calls for allowing in food, medicine, and other critical supplies. Hong Kong's leaders are being criticized after 3 top pro-democracy activists were sentenced to jail. Agnes Chow, Joshua Wong, and Ivan Lam will serve 7 to 13 months over a protest last year. Supporters demonstrated in solidarity today, some hiding their faces out of caution as China cracks down on dissent.
Compared to other protesters who did damage on public facilities or even people who were charged with riot, they were just participating in the protest. Everyone was angry at that time. They shouldn't be the only people to take the blame. It's just because they are more renowned that they receive a heavy sentencing.
In Washington, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi denounced what she called brutal sentencing of young champions of democracy. Back in this country, the Boeing 737 MAX made its first public flight since being grounded for 20 months after 2 fatal crashes. Reporters flew on a 737 MAX from Dallas to Tulsa, Oklahoma, as part of an effort by American Airlines to restore public trust. American plans to return the planes to service on December 29th. The U.S. Transportation Department is putting a limit on emotional support animals on airliners. A rule issued today allows only service dogs that are trained to help people with physical or psychiatric disabilities. Airlines say that passengers have brought along everything from turtles to a peacock in a bid to avoid cargo fees. Wall Street had a relatively quiet day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained about 60 points to close at 29,883. The Nasdaq fell 5 points, but the S&P 500 added 6 for another record close. And American Olympic champion Rafer Johnson died today in Los Angeles. He captured the decathlon at the 1960 Rome Olympics and ultimately set 3 world records. In 1968, Johnson worked on Robert F. Kennedy's presidential campaign and helped subdue the gunman who fatally shot Kennedy. Rafer Johnson was 86 years old. Still to come on the NewsHour, how the COVID vaccine will be distributed. Strong words from a Republican in Georgia on the dangers of violent language. A Renaissance master breaks gender barriers centuries after her work hit the canvas, and much more.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
The United Kingdom's approval today of Pfizer's COVID vaccine dialed up the anticipation, pressures, and questions about vaccines in the U.S. and how the distribution will be handled. William Brangham talks with one of the federal government's leading authorities on making this happen.
Judy, the Pfizer vaccine, which needs ultra-cold storage, is likely to be available in the U.S. later this month, and it will likely go to healthcare workers and then to elderly Americans living in long-term care facilities. The government's program also anticipates offering the vaccine from Moderna later this month. All told, the government says 20 million people could be vaccinated in the U.S. by the end of this year and possibly 100 million by the end of February 2021. Dr. Monsef Slaoui is the chief scientific officer for the government's vaccine program known as Operation Warp Speed, and he joins me now. Dr. Slaoui, very good to have you on the NewsHour. 100 million Americans by the end of February. That seems a remarkably optimistic and ambitious goal.
Well, it is an ambitious goal, and it's a goal that we have been working very hard since the month of May to be able to achieve, frankly. We are, as you know, on the verge of having 2 vaccines approved. I hope by the FDA on December 11th or so and December 18th or so, and we can start immunizing. We think we will have 40 million doses of these vaccines in the month of December. That's enough to immunize 20 million people because each individual needs 2 doses of vaccine. And then we plan to have about 60 million doses on the month of January, and then 100 million doses between these 2 vaccines in the month of February. And we feel that the plan is achievable, is stretched, is challenging, but is achievable.
It is remarkable that we're even talking about vaccines being developed and rolling out in the same year that we discovered the virus we're trying to vaccinate against. You have said that we could be close to herd immunity in the U.S. by as early as May. How many Americans would likely have to be vaccinated to achieve that goal?
Yes, this is very, very important, frankly, an area of potential concern for everybody involved in public health, in the sense that we need about 75 to 80% of the total population to be immune against the virus for herd immunity to really impact the rest of the population. We will be producing enough vaccine doses by the month of May to cover about 80% of the population. What we don't know, but we really hope that it will happen, is that the vaccine doses will actually be used and people will accept to be immunized. Very, very important. We're working hard, trying to talk to everybody about how we developed this vaccine, how we didn't cut any corner. We took financial risk, we took operational risk, we did not take any scientific or safety risk. We are thrilled that the vaccines are highly efficacious, and we look forward to the reviews totally transparently by independent bodies, independent advisory board, for instance, to the FDA, that will look into the data, discuss the data in public transparently, and then potentially recommend the vaccine for approval.
You're talking about this concern that many people share, that there's a lot of people who are suspicious about vaccines and might not take them even if the data are quite good. What other challenges, apart from that, do you see as challenges in the road ahead?
Well, there are several challenges. First, our plans rely on 6 vaccines being successful and approved. We have 2. We have another 2 that are completing their phase 3 trials, probably reading out in January and hopefully approved in late January or early February. They need to be effective. We hope they will be, but we're never sure. We'll know when we know. And then 2 more that may come in the month of May. Those may have less impact on the first round of immunization, I would say, in the population. The second thing that's need to happen is we are manufacturing this vaccine daily, and every single dose that we produce will be shipped outside. This is very complex manufacturing, and we just reached the industrial scale for manufacturing. Problems could happen. We don't have reasons to believe that they will happen, but having long experience for 30 years producing new vaccines, early on, things happen, reality happens. We may have slippages of time by a week or a day or 2 weeks.
The World Health Organization today cautioned that there may simply not be enough vaccine in the supply chain to head off a major surge this winter, which many people fear. Do you worry that this good news, and it is undeniably good news, about these vaccines might cause some people to loosen up their precautions and think, oh, the end is near, we don't have to worry about masking and distancing and all of those things?
Well, this is a real concern, indeed, because vaccine, even in this country, where unfortunately we are experiencing a major surge, and it could get worse, unfortunately, we will not be able to immunize all the population at once. This is going to happen gradually over the next 5 or 6 months. During that period of time, everyone needs to assume and act as if they were not protected. We need to have our mask, we need to keep our distance, we need to wash our hands, we need to continue being extremely aware of what we're doing and where we are, because even if we are immunized, we may be protected against disease, but we may carry the virus to somebody else. And just, we would show the wrong example. So I think it's a very important point that you raise. It is a concern. I hope everybody will understand. It's a matter of only a few months. So please be patient and be resilient.
All right, Dr. Moncef Slaoui, Chief Scientific Officer for the Operation Warp Speed. Thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, a clarion call to curb threats of violence against election workers. White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor begins our report.
It has all gone too far.
A cry of alarm from a Republican and a top Georgia elections official. On Tuesday, Gabriel Sterling condemned dangerous language aimed at elections officials, and he warned of potential violence.
Someone's going to get hurt, someone's going to get shot, someone's going to get killed. And it's not right.
Sterling criticized President Trump and his allies for inciting followers and accused other Republicans of standing by in silence.
All of you who have not said a damn word are complicit in this.
Today, Sterling's boss and fellow Republican, Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, backed him up and joined in blaming the president.
This is exactly the kind of language that is at the base of a growing threat environment for election workers who are simply doing their jobs.
But President Trump released a 46-minute video repeating his claims of fraud and saying the election system is under coordinated assault and siege. And Trump lawyer Joseph DeGeneva suggested that Christopher Krebs, who was fired by the president from his job as director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, be shot. Today, Krebs responded during a virtual forum with the Washington Post.
It has to stop. We have to let the professionals do their jobs. And it's well beyond time for everyone on both sides of the political spectrum to call for an end and to call for this to our process or certification process and moving on into the next administration.
But at a White House briefing, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany argued there is blame to go around.
We condemn any threats against anyone. There's no place for violence. What I will say, though, too, is that the president's lawyers, they were doxxed by a left organization. Their private information put out, so we're seeing that happen to people on both sides of the argument, and there's no place for that ever anywhere.
All this as the president continues to insist, without evidence, that the election was stolen. He has yet to concede to President-elect Joe Biden. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Yamiche Alcindor.
And Gabriel Sterling, the Georgia election official who had sharp words for his fellow Republicans yesterday, joins me now from Atlanta. Mr. Sterling, thank you so much for making time to talk with us. You caught our attention yesterday. Tell us what the message was you were trying to convey when you said somebody could get killed, somebody could get shot.
It's a very straightforward message, and thanks for having me, Judy. That's exactly what we're seeing on the ground here in Georgia with the environment that's being created through misinformation, disinformation, lying, that people are being threatened who are just simply doing their jobs. And the final straw for me yesterday was that young contractor that was there for Dominion Voting Systems who was simply doing his job. And somebody got his name, started sending out a video of him doing an innocent part of his job, saying he was manipulating votes and should be, was treasonous. And then within a couple of tweets of that, somebody had hung a GIF of a noose swinging saying, "You've committed treason, sir. May God have mercy on your soul." And at that point, I was done. I mean, the secretary, he ran for office. He's had protection. He and his wife have been getting threats for 3 weeks. I've had police protection in front of my house for a couple of weeks, but I took a higher profile job. This kid's just doing his job. And that's the same things for those hundreds of thousands of election workers around this country who literally ran the most secure election in United States history this year.
You seemed to be yesterday pleading with President Trump, as in your words, to stop inspiring potential acts of violence. What is it that the president has said and done that led you to this point?
Your vote's being stolen. Secretary Raffensperger, a lifelong conservative Republican, is an enemy of the people, asking essentially the 2 senators from the state to call for the resignation Secretary Raffensperger for, rampant mismanagement, allowing fraud to happen. None of it's true. None of it. And frankly, it undermines our nation, undermines democracy, and undermines the republic to continue to insist that there is some path to win. I am a Republican. I will vote for those 2 senators because I think it's important for the Republicans to control the United States Senate moving forward. But the president is in a position of responsibility. He needs to take some.
Well, the White House said today that they don't condone violence. The Trump campaign says they don't condone violence. Is that accepting responsibility?
It's great to have your spokespeople go out and say what are the right words. But as you saw today, he put out another video saying there's massive voter fraud in this state. when there's zero proof of it? None. And in fact, to this point, some of the people who are part of his, formerly part of his legal team had an event today where they said, don't trust any of these voting machines. In fact, don't go vote in the election coming up in January. This office wants to encourage everybody to vote, Republican and Democrat alike, and fight it out. But this has turned into a situation, like I said, somebody asked me what these charges were. I said they're part of a fever dream. They're made up out of whole cloth. I mean, there's one of the early conspiracy theories was that there was these machines were flipping votes and there was algorithms and all this stuff. So, we did a hand audit, and the hand audit was so precise and so aligned with the outcomes, it was only off by 0.1053% from the amount of ballots cast and 0.0099% from the margin, when most hand counts are off by 1 to 2%. This state did it right. We ran a secure election. The president came up short. Maybe if he hadn't discouraged people from using absentee by mail during a pandemic, it would have had a different outcome.
You called it a fever dreams, but is there any rational explanation for what the president and his allies are saying?
I don't mind the idea of using the court system, which they are doing. They're going to be filing an election challenge tomorrow. That is part of the due process. But to go out there blindly swinging a bat saying that there's conspiracies everywhere and fraud when there's literally no proof. This office is continuing to investigate all the items brought to us around absentee ballots or around any kind of election violation.
You say you do plan still to vote for the Republican candidates for the Senate, but at the same time, these are two individuals, Senator Perdue, Senator Loeffler, who've called on your boss, the Secretary of State, to resign. They've said, and I'm reading, they've said he failed to deliver honest and transparent elections. He's failed the people of Georgia. They have not condemned what the president and others are saying.
They have not, and it's unfortunate, and it makes me angry on some levels, obviously. But here's the reality, and this is what we see happening right now. These two senators are in the fight of their political lives, and they know if they cross President Trump and maybe, defend some of the stuff with this really secure election that we had in the state, he could do one or two tweets and kill their campaigns. They need the Trump base of voters to show up, and that's what they're having to deal with. And I feel for them on that front. I'm sure at some level they don't really care about my sympathy, but we need them, from my point of view. I am a Republican, but not in my position here. I want them to win, but I want everybody to vote.
But is there fear that President Trump wouldn't support them, justification for their continuing to stand behind these claims that he's making?
I can't speak for the senators. I would hope that wouldn't be enough, but when you have your politics in line with this thing and realize this is the control of the United States Senate, which would give Democrats complete control of all the levers of power in the nation at this point, because if they blow up the filibuster, this is about packing the court. This is about protecting small businesses. This is about trying to find a rational path through COVID. Understand, I'm not here to, I'm not should be talking about politics on this front. I express my own opinion of this. Is to realize that we do not need to have the president basically telling lies about how the election's going, which is inspiring people to potentially say, hey, the president wants me to take action against these enemies of the people. And these are election workers that are just doing their jobs, trying to protect the machinery of democracy. And when Stacey Abrams did the 2018 said she wasn't going to concede, it undermined the democratic process. What Donald Trump does in 2020, it undermines the democratic process. They're two sides of the same coin. They're both wrong.
Gabriel Sterling, head of elections operations implementation for the state of Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Great to be here.
Lawmakers here in Washington are under pressure to reach another economic relief deal as COVID cases and deaths spike across the country. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said in a statement today that the bipartisan bill unveiled yesterday should be the starting point for negotiations going forward. Illinois Senator Dick Durbin is the second highest ranking Democrat in the Senate, and he joins us now. Senator Durbin, thank you so much for being with us again. What caused the Democrats to change their starting point? We had heard Speaker Pelosi insisting on that $2.2 trillion, but now you're looking at something that's a lot less than that. What happened?
Well, we're in the reality period of time. On December the 26th, 12 million Americans will be cut off from unemployment insurance. We know that businesses are struggling to survive and they need a helping hand. State and local governments have faced a downturn in their revenues. We know we need more money for the distribution of the vaccine. When you stack them all up, Judy, that's why this bipartisan coalition of senators and House members have been working for weeks to find something that we can agree on, that we can fight for. And we've done it. We've come up, I think, maybe one or two items still to be resolved, important items, but only one or two. And so many of them that we've agreed on that the leaders, Pelosi, Schumer, have said they want this to be the starting point to get something done now.
And I know you've been working with that bipartisan group, but Senator, with all due respect, the need has been great for months now. Why just now, in early December, are Democrats moving their position?
I'm the wrong senator to ask. The senator should be Senator McConnell. He was the one who decides what's brought to the floor. And 6 months ago, I think it was 6 months ago, Nancy Pelosi passed a substantial bill, which I fully supported, the HEROES Act, and then she came back and reduced the number to try to get in range of negotiation and passed that bill as well. So we've done this. We've brought these to the House and the Senate for consideration for months on end. But we're at the end of our rope here. We've got to do something. How in the world can the members of the Congress go home and celebrate Christmas knowing that the next morning 12 million Americans are losing their unemployment insurance?
What do you think it will take to get a deal? What is going to need to have, what are Democrats prepared to live with, and where do you see give on the part of Republicans?
Well, I can tell you we've been giving negotiations back and forth for the last several weeks, and there's been a lot of give and take, and there still is. We hardly ever meet that we don't revisit one of these items on here. But it's $908 billion of basic bipartisan agreement. What we need Senator McConnell to say, you're going to get a day on the floor. We're going to have a vote on this, and we're going to do it in a timely fashion so that we can consider passing it in the Senate, maybe do the same in the House or some version of it, work out our differences and get it done on a bipartisan basis. I think that's what the American people are clamoring for.
Are you satisfied with this? I mean, clearly there's more you would have liked to have seen in here. But you can live with this, and do you think the majority of Democrats can live with this?
I think they can. I believe they can. Now, Pelosi and Schumer have said this is a starting point, so maybe or not there will be some further negotiations. But we believe this $908 billion for the next 4 months, December through the first 3 months of the year, is an emergency response that is desperately needed. When we're talking about distributing vaccine, why in the world is there any difference of opinion? When we're talking about money for education, when we're talking about money for businesses to be able to survive, and basically to give to units of government some kind of relief from the struggles that they're going through.
Senator, I know you're pointing a finger at the Republican leader, Majority Leader McConnell, but of course Republicans are pointing right back at Democrats and Speaker Pelosi and saying there was no give on her part, on the part of Democrats. What is the public to believe here?
I hope they'll believe this simple statement. This proposal, this bipartisan proposal from House and Senate Republicans and Democrats, should have a day on the floor of each chamber. If people want to offer amendments, so be it. Let them offer amendments. But let's start at this point that we worked out among ourselves a bipartisan agreement. If you can come up with something better, more power to you. But if you can't, let's at least do this as quickly as possible.
Do you think this can get done by the end of next week when Congress is due to go home?
Absolutely. It can absolutely get done. Senator McConnell, as I said, controls the floor. He decides what comes up on the floor, and he can make the decision that we're going to move through this very quickly, and he should. None of us want to spend Christmas Eve or Christmas Day here in Washington, but we also don't want to go home and turn our backs on the people who desperately need our help.
And Senator, is part of your thinking that if you can get this passed, that you would expect President-elect Biden, his team, the Democrats under a new administration to come back early in the new year and ask for more relief? Is that part of what the thinking is?
I don't want to try to guess what the Biden agenda will be or the timing of it. But for instance, we provide, I think it's $8 billion for additional distribution of the vaccine across America. It could be that number is not enough and we need more. Are we going to slow down the effort to do it? It would be under the new president. He would make a proposal, maybe in some other areas, think there was a sense of urgency. What we try to do is take it through the end of March. And beyond that, it's going to be up to the new administration and the new Congress.
The second-ranking Democrat in the United States Senate, Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Judy.
And as we heard a little while ago from Republican Gabriel Sterling of Georgia, the language around the election, denial of the vote, false claims of fraud, and potentially inciting violence are dangerous. Sterling, a top elections official in Georgia, claims that his state did it right as they now face a runoff that will determine control of the U.S. Senate. And as we just heard just now from Senator Durbin, there's a critical need for economic relief from the pandemic. Republican Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana is one of the senators involved in that bipartisan bill that we were just discussing, aimed at addressing some of those needs. He's also a physician, and he joins us now. Senator Cassidy, I think there you are. I wanted to make sure you were with us at the Capitol. Thank you so much for being with us. I don't know if you were able to hear any of what Senator Durbin said, but it's very clear from listening to him that Democrats are prepared to support either this bipartisan proposal as it is or something close to that. Where are Republicans on this?
There's a lot of enthusiasm on our side. People want to get something done. Now, still, we have to show the details. You know the old saying, devil's in the details. We're working on a bipartisan basis, House and Senate members. I just got off a call regarding that to come to mutual understanding of those details. And people are operating in good faith, not holding out trying to get something else, operating in good faith. And that's very encouraging.
Well, we had heard from Senate Majority Leader McConnell that he was not in favor of the amount of aid, federal unemployment assistance that would be part of this bipartisan proposal. Is he prepared to change his mind on that? Do you know?
I cannot speak for Mitch McConnell. But if you look at the comments he made earlier, they're actually in line with what we have been speaking of. He's not in favor of bringing a bill that cannot pass. This is bipartisan. It is the only bill that's bipartisan. He's not in favor of doing something which is merely to make a point. Hey, I agree with that. If it's not bipartisan, then it's just a messaging bill. The best way to send a message is to pass a bill, and if it's not bipartisan, it'll never pass. And so I think actually if you look at the qualifications he has for getting something through, we meet those qualifications, which is why I'm told that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has come out in support of. So, you know, we're lining up that support from business interests, from others as well. I'd like to think that Leader McConnell will come on board.
So I just am trying to understand what it is you think that could be an obstacle to his support, because for month after month, we've seen him resist the proposals, not only from Speaker Pelosi, but other proposals that were as much money or more money, not much more money, but some more than what is represented in this bipartisan proposal.
First, let's stop and look at the proposals that Speaker Pelosi put forward. It mentioned marijuana more than it mentioned jobs. It had a bailout for millionaires and billionaires in big blue states. Now, that was not really a proposal meant to attract attention. I will go back to what I said earlier. If it's not bipartisan, it is a messaging bill. And that was a messaging bill. This is bipartisan. This is a bill that sends a message that we can pass a bill that we care about the American people. I would not look too harshly upon the leader not considering the HEROES Act, Speaker Pelosi's bill, because it was a messaging bill. This is a bill that can pass.
Do you believe this can get done by the end of next week? Senator Durbin said he does. Are you optimistic?
I don't know. I mean, there's a big spending bill that we have to pass, the National Defense Authorization Act. In the lineup of that which must pass, maybe those two come first, or maybe not. But I do think the progress we've made, the support, and I can't emphasize enough, Judy, people from either side of the party coming up to give solutions to a problem that we know, okay, Republicans are bringing a solution that we know Democrats care about, would you be okay with it, and vice versa, that is progress. There's a heck of a lot of goodwill going into finding a product that Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate can agree upon. That's what gives me encouragement.
Senator Cassidy, I want to bring up a different subject with you. A few minutes ago, I interviewed top elections official in the state of Georgia, Gabriel Sterling, who has just in the strongest language condemned the president's, what he says are the president's language that has led to threats of violence against elections officials in Georgia. He called on Republicans everywhere to condemn what the president is doing. Are you prepared to do that?
I have said that although I voted for President Trump and wished him to be elected, it is clear from the Electoral College awarding 270 votes to Joe Biden that Joe Biden has won. I will also say that if someone's to make allegations, they should be made in court and they should be verifiable. If you have allegations to make which are not verifiable, which do not hold up in court, it would be responsible not to make those allegations. I have not followed what the president is saying. I am just saying that in general. If you're going to make allegations, they better be supported in a legal court, and you should not make them if they are not sustainable in a court of law.
Well, President Trump, as recently as today, is saying that the election in Georgia was rigged, that it is riddled with fraud. He's continuing to do this. People who are allied with the president are making threats against elections officials in Georgia and other states. Who's responsible for that?
First,
does the buck stop with the president?
First, let's say this, that threats of violence against others are wrong, period, end of story, and should not be made. Secondly, there's a Republican governor in Georgia. There's a Republican there's a Republican Secretary of State, both of whom are strong President Trump supporters, and both of whom, as best I know, have assured that the election process was valid. And my understanding is that there was a hand recount, which again verified the results. And so if somebody has, whoever that person is, has some